Tuesday, April 6th meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Rebecca, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Casissa?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Here.
And Mayor Beckman?
Here, thank you. Please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Now it's open time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public who would like to speak on any items not on our agenda tonight to go ahead and do so. So if you'd like to speak on an item that's not on our agenda, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email public comment at tcmmail.org. Speakers will be given 3 minutes apiece, and I'm seeing 2 hands up right now, so we'll start with Roy and then go to Lucy.
Okay, good evening. I need a slide. I have a slide presentation to show, 5 slides. Hopefully that's up.
Yes,
hopefully
I'm trying to open them. I had to restart my computer, and I also all over the timer. So
okay.
Give me 10 more seconds, and I think I'll be good. Okay, so that's your open time slides. Sorry, Roy sent 2 slides. I just have to share my screen.
Computers are so much fun.
And I also have to start the timer. All right, what's going to happen is you're probably going to see my screen, and then you're probably going to see the fact that I need to start that timer. So just bear with me a moment. Are you seeing?
Okay, there. Great.
Okay.
We just need to have the blue sky minimized.
Timer's
okay,
going.
So good evening. The data is a little bit small, but what I've done is I've graphed data from 1900 to through 2020. And this is what this is showing is the high tides, and we're using the San Francisco tide station, and it's using the station datum. So the reason you want to use a station datum is all the values plot out as positive. The station datum is set at a low level, so the low water level will never reach it. So you'll never have a negative water value. So these values over on the left-hand side are in feet, and it's the highest tide per month, every month from January of 1900 all the way through December of 2020. And you can see that the tide is rising. There has been a trend line. So I mapped the low level height of the trend line to the high level of trend line, or left to right. And we see that the water has risen 12 inches in 121 years. That's 2.52 millimeters per year. Next slide, please. Go to full screen on that, and it'll you can just click it. Okay, it's okay. Okay, so you're going to see 4 slides, 2 from the San Francisco station and 2 from the Richmond station. All the data is the same, or from the same origin as the first slide, but what I'm doing is moving up the years. So this is from the year 2000 to 2020, that's 21 years. And we can see that at the San Francisco station, the rise in sea level trend is 3.63 millimeters per year. That kind of dovetails with the satellite water levels of 3.3 plus or minus 0.4 millimeters. So this is the San Francisco station. And if you notice on the left-hand side, what the height is, and you're going to see a big difference on the next one, the Richmond one. Okay, so well, I feel like I'm a little jittery here. Okay, so the next one, the highest water point in that 21 years is January 2005. And we can see that the water level or the trend is 3.92 millimeters per year. Okay, so that's even going up. So it looks like the tide is rising higher at the Richmond station. Okay, let's go to the next station. Hold on to your seats. Oh, what happened here? This is 5 years, to January 2016 to January 2021. Believe it or not, at the San Francisco station, the tide trend is dropping 0.61 millimeters per year. Okay, next slide. And here's the Richmond. Whoa, it's dropping even more. So it's important, and that's why I stress on the climate change report that we get local data. Very important, because this shows.
And Roy, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up here. Sorry, I just saw I know we can't see the timer, but I just scrolled over to it.
Okay, thank you.
Up. Okay, thank you very much, Roy. Appreciate it. And let's see here. Our next hand up is going to be from Lucy. And oh, it says that I cannot allow Lucy Mcpherson to talk because she's using an older version of Zoom, and I need to promote her to a panelist to talk. Rebecca, is that okay with you?
Yes, if whatever we need to do to help.
Okay, Lucy, I'm going to promote you to panelist, which should allow you to talk. And just a warning, keep an eye on whether your camera's on or not, and whether you're prepared for that. I don't know if it's going to come on with your camera or not. So I'm gonna promote you to panelist.
Can I come back on again? Say computer's even more fun. Did you hear
right, Lucy? I'm going to bring you on here in 3, 2, 1.
Hi.
Hello. You hear me? Yes.
All right, cool. Mayor Beckman and members of the Town Council, this is Lucy Mcpherson. I serve on the Parks and Recreation Commission as the Youth Commissioner, and during the month of April, I am the designated commissioner who will attend the Town Council meetings and report back to the Parks and Recreation Commission on matters heard by the Town Council. Thank you, and I just want to let you know that I'm in attendance, and I want to congratulate the new Town Council member, Layla Mongan, on her selection to serve on the Town Council.
Great, thank you so much, Lucy, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us. And we're gonna go next to, I'm gonna mispronounce this, I wanna say Zitlali, but I'm gonna bring you on here. Please tell me how to pronounce that.
Hello, yes, Zitlali, thank you. So I wanted to speak on, 1 second. On the topic of secondhand smoke.
Oh, so sure, and Zitlali, that item is going to come up if it's about the ordinance for multi-unit housing and smoking restrictions. That's going to come up on our consent calendar. So I'd just ask you if that's what your comment is on, to just go ahead and hold that until we get to the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing, we'll come back to you. Thank you. And I saw one more hand up. I thought it has disappeared. I'll check real quick. Rebecca, do we have any emailed public comments for open time?
I don't believe emailed public comments for open time.
Okay, and that last hand that I was seeing has disappeared. So seeing no further hands up here, we're gonna close open time and proceed with our agenda. So for tonight, that'll bring us to item 3, which is the oath of office. We're very excited to have our new council member designate, Layla Mongan, here with us. And Rebecca, I will turn it over to you so that you can administer the oath of office.
Thank you, Mayor Beckman. Just wanted to check to see if I was bringing over family members to participate in the swearing in ceremony, which I see them and I am bringing them over now. Hello, Mongan family. You're on, you're live. Welcome. So what I will do now is administer the oath of office to our newly appointed council member, Layla Mongan. And after we do the oath of office, then she'll have an opportunity to say a few words, and her family will have an opportunity to say a few words, and we can take any public comments. Layla, do you have the oath in front of you?
I do.
Okay, that'll make it a little easier. So I'll read portions and then you will recite it back to me. I state your name.
I, Layla Mongan.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Leela.
And Councilmember Mongan has the oath of office that she will sign and return to me. And
fantastic. And as Amy
welcome to say a few words and introduce your family.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say I'm really thrilled to be here. I want to say thanks to the the council members other than myself. Thanks for your vote of confidence in me and selecting me to fill this position. And even though I was not elected, I look forward to serving, all the residents of Corte Madera to the best of my ability. So I'm really, really pleased to be here. My family who's on is Mike, my husband, my daughter Kate, who just turned 10 years old, and my son Jamie. You can just see the top of his curly head. There he is. And he is 6.5.
Fantastic. Well, we are thrilled to have you with us, Leela, and thank you so much to your family for joining us. And as Amy advised us, let's just let the record reflect that we now have all 5 of the current Corte Madera Town Council members present at this meeting. And with that, we can move on to the selection of the vice mayor. That's item 4 on our agenda.
Oh, I think we have to take public comments if there's any public.
Oh, do we?
Well.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, let's take public comment then on the swearing in of Councilmember Mongan. So if anybody would like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcml.org. And we'll just give a minute here for folks to go ahead and raise their hands.
I don't think there's any new hands up.
Okay, I see Zitlali still has her hand up. I'm not sure if that was just waiting to speak on the secondhand smoking item or not. We can bring her on real fast just to confirm.
Oh, I just wanted to say congrats. Nice having you on the council. I don't know how this goes, but just wanted to say that was cool to see.
That's fantastic. That's perfect. Thank you. Great. And I do not see any other hands up. So we can close public comment on this item and head now to item 4, which is selection of the vice mayor. And Amy, should we take public comment before we go to council discussion on this item?
Yes, I think.
Okay, fantastic. So then we're going to take public comment on selection of the vice mayor. So if anybody would like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcml.org. And we'll give another moment here for anybody to raise their hands who might want to comment on this item.
Actually, I need just a moment. I accidentally moved the wrong Mongan back to attendee.
Oh, no worries.
Sorry about that. Okay, all set.
Perfect, great. And the only hand up we have is again from Zitlali, so we'll just make sure she doesn't have anything she wants to say on this item.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
No worries at all. We'll come back to you at the consent calendar. Thank you. Great, so seeing no public comment on this item, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for the selection of the vice mayor. And if my colleagues don't mind, I would like to offer the first nomination of Fred Casissa. Yeah, Bob.
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from council members? And if not, we'll go ahead and have a vote.
Councilmember Casissa.
We couldn't hear him, but it looked like a yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes. Congratulations, Mr. Vice Mayor. And would you like to say any words?
No, I just want to thank everybody for their support. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to serve with you. And with that, that concludes item 4. And that brings us to item 5, which is presentations. Our first presentation, item 5A, is recognition of our previous Vice Mayor and outgoing Town Council member, David Coonhart, in acknowledgement of his service to the town of Corte Madera.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, if I may start with this. Rebecca, can you put up our prestigious gift for our outgoing Vice Mayor? No, you can't hurt any, you can't hit anyone with that, David, but I just wanted to start off that, you know, I think being a council member is one of the most underappreciated jobs in our town or in local government. And people don't get to see really the blood, sweat, and tears that you all put in to your job. And I got to see it firsthand. And I'm just so excited for your next step in the journey in life. I know that you'll always be there as a mentor to provide advice to staff, the council, and town moving forward with all the issues that face us with climate change and the issues and dangers you know, that we all face. But I want everyone to know and hear that, you know, I've never met anyone quite like you, the tireless passion that you have for the job and your thoughtful insight and guidance to staff, you know, the patience that you've shown. You know, you've had to spend a lot of time and patience with me over the years to really get me to a level where I could start to move pieces for the betterment of the town. And I really appreciate that about you. And I thank you for that. And I also did, you know, your dedication, like we talked about, for all the climate initiatives, not only locally, but regionally and nationally. You're a leader and a force to, you know, to be reckoned with in this area. And I don't know that the town of Corte Madera fully appreciates what you've done for us and how special it was to have you as part of this. And so, you know, I just personally and professionally, I love you. I appreciate everything that you've done. And I really look forward to you enjoying the next evolution of the journey of life. And staff has something for you. I know you're out of town right now, but we will definitely catch you before you leave and celebrate you appropriately. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Todd. And I'd like to offer a moment for our council members and also for David to speak, and then open it up to the public for anybody who might like to make any comments. And the first thing I just want to say, you know, David, I'll try and keep it short. There's so much to say about you, but it's been a real pleasure and an honor serving with you on the town council. It was a pleasure running with you. It was a pleasure being elected with you. It was a pleasure serving with you. You're a fantastic guy. Your dedication to our town, I think, is clear to everyone. There's a lot to admire about you, a lot that I do admire about you. I will say, you know, your dedication to really protecting Corte Madera and really our entire planet from climate change, I think is huge. It's incredible. You know, that's a fight that you really can't bring enough energy to. And you really, I think, never shied away from being a leader in that. And kind of along those lines, I just, you know, one thing that I always looked up to you for was I felt like you were never afraid to speak your mind and argue what you felt was right for the town, even when, even when there was vocal opposition, or even when it seemed like it might not be politically expedient. And I just thought that sort of, you know, courage and honesty is exactly what we need in all levels of government. So I just wanted to thank you for all of that. Thank you for your service. And with that, I'll turn it over to any of our colleagues here that might like to speak.
We don't have to have a long piling on.
Sure, we'll go to Fred and then Bob.
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. Again, David, I just want to appreciate all you did for the town. And I think your passion for climate change, you look at where you were, the town was like 2 or 3 years ago and where we're at now, we've come a long way. And one thing that I really appreciated from you is I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I met David, not on purpose, when I was hiking up on the hills above Christmas Tree Hill, just by accident. And I think him and I, we walked together for about over an hour, and we just had one of the greatest conversations. I think since I've known David, I've always talked to him, but on a shorter term or shorter basis. It was just a great conversation. So again, David, you may be out of sight, but you're not out of mind, and you can still zoom in.
Fortunately, the Brown Act didn't prevent hiking.
And we'll go to Bob.
Yeah, David, thank you for your time and your dedication, and for really taking the topic of climate change, which was always talked about, but almost an afterthought, and you really brought it to the forefront and made it one of the primary things we're dealing with. And that's because of your time and your energy and your dedication to that topic. And I really appreciate it because it's so critical. And I'm glad we're doing something about it. Best of luck in your new life on the East Coast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. Any other council members that would like to speak? Yeah, Charles.
Thanks for your service, David. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I wish you all the best in your new journey.
Thank you.
And David, would you like to say a few words to us?
I would, if you don't mind. I know that you have a long, responsible meeting, but I have a couple of things to say. And 25 years in Corte Madera, I think, entitles me to say a little bit. First of all, I wanted to reassure folks that I am not leaving as much as I am going home. I was born in Boston. Before we came here, we spent 9 wonderful years in Needham, Massachusetts, and I spent a total of 57 years visiting a certain lake in New Hampshire, which we're going to visit again. And we were at last summer when we effectively made up our minds that we were going to spend retirement in a kind of a new, exciting way. And then we found an even better connected, even more forward-thinking place in southern Maine, and found a place, and we're really looking forward to being there. But Corte Madera, don't forget, overwhelmingly has a fabulous spirit of volunteerism, and you also should keep leaning on that, whether you're leaning on the Women's Improvement Club, which, don't forget, predated the incorporation of Corte Madera and has always been there and continues to be the background leader of the town. That women's club is really, really tough. About 40 years later, the Lions Club came into being, and the Lions Club, which both Fred and I were fortunate enough to serve as president of, it will do anything. If you ask them, if you have a need, you ask them and they'll do it. And that was a really, really precious time for me, serving in that, whether it's beer and hot dogs in the park on 4th of July, or the senior share, going out and helping frail seniors change light bulbs. Love the hiking and climbing. I would say the great schools of Corte Madera won us here, as well as the beautiful weather in the lee of Mount Tam, much sunnier and warmer than downtown San Francisco, which is where I came to work. And it is not to, it is to be valued, and the great schools in particular. I know that the council doesn't have any authority over the schools, but never forget that they're the one, that's the thing that brings most folks to town. And if I could offer any advice at all, it would be simply the word balance. Balance of work and home life, balance of commuting out and staying in, balance of investment versus enjoyment, balance of jobs versus housing, balance of different needs to address climate change. And if you could permit me to tell one little story on Mayor Beckman, which is more of a commentary on my own arrogance as it is on his competence, but I think it's something that y'all should hear. Early in 2018, when I decided to run for town council a second time, the first time I lost, I saw, well, who's running? Well, I guess, incumbent Bob would be running, good. And I supported him, but who else is running? Who is this Eli Beckman, this upstart, this 25-year-old? And folks out in the county were asking me, who is this young person? And so I said, well, I've got to meet him. I'm going to meet him and I'll show him. I'm the one with experience. I'm the one with a ton of investment experience, community development investment. I've got all these organizations and the county connections and so forth. I'll show him and maybe he'll even pull back. Well, we got together and it was very, very quickly. It didn't take me any time to understand that here is a person of phenomenal, strong, forward values, very affirmative, very connected, and he was in it to win it. There was no question. He was in it to win it. And in fact, he got twice as many votes as I did in that election. He just really, really impressed me. And I pulled back my arrogant reins and listened, and we have been good partners ever since. If any of you would like any kind of help, partnership, mentoring of any kind at any time, just let me know. I do have to change my email away from Comcast because we're moving out of the Comcast territory, but my name with the number 8@gmail.com is it. Thank you so much. And I love the little plaque that you have held up. I love it. I love it. It reminds me of the one that my dad got when he was chairman of the Board of Selectmen in Dedham, Massachusetts, a century ago. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That was really, really sweet and really fantastic to hear from you. I'd like to open this up now for members of the public. I'm sure we've got some folks on the line who might like to comment. And I also just wanted to note that we've got some activity in the chat here. David Bell says, applause to David K. And I think that's a sentiment that's shared by many. So we'll just give a moment here. If any members of the public on the line would like to say a few words, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email public comment at tcmmail.org. And I'll just check with Rebecca. Did we get
an email?
Perfect.
From Dorsey McTaggart, who apologizes that she couldn't make the meeting tonight. She said, David, you have made such a valuable impression on our town of Corte Madera that part of you will always remain. This move to me is a bold one, and from what we know has all the markings of a sure thing. The Coonhart family will be happy in Maine, and although we shall miss you bundles, we are happy for you, Dorsey McTaggart.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Dorsey. I'm not seeing any hands go up. David, did you want to say something else? You look like
I just say that I'm not going to slack off. I have already just a week ago Friday had a meeting, a small meeting with Senator Angus King, independent, who's on the Senate Climate Solutions Caucus, and we had an excellent discussion that went longer than it was planned to go, and he's really listening and acting with an independent spine.
So glad to hear that. Thank you, David. And it looks like there's no other public comment. Oh, Susie Beatty's just put her hand up, so we're going to bring Susie on here.
Well, I just have to say, and David knows this, so when he first ran, I wasn't so sure about him. And you know what? He blew it out of the park. He did a really wonderful job, and I love the direction that he went. And David knows this, and I consider him a friend. So thank you so much, and lots of good luck to you, David. We're going to miss you.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you very much, Susie. And I'm not seeing any other hands up right now, so we will close public comment on this item. And I think we'll just send David off with another huge thank you, and you will be dearly missed. And I hope that you'll stay in touch with us. It's really been a pleasure.
The final thing, I am so proud of the selection you all made of the person to replace me. She is so much brighter and so much more articulate than I ever was. You have absolutely done the number one thing that you could have done. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. And with that, I'm sorry to say that concludes the fun portion of tonight's meeting. We've got a pretty beefy agenda ahead of us. So we're going to get into kind of the nitty gritty now. So first thing we're going to move on to next, that's going to be item 5B, a presentation from Carrie Pollard from the Marin Municipal Water District regarding water conservation. So I'll turn it over to Carrie and staff if there's any introduction that they want to make.
Carrie is coming over now.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Carrie Pollard with Marin Water, and I have a brief presentation that I'm going to walk you through, and we'll leave some time for Q&A as well, because I'm sure there'll be questions that arise. All right, well, drought is here. Time to conserve water. Let's see here. Just a brief overview of Marin Water. So we are the oldest municipal water district in the state of California. We're responsible for providing drinking water to over 190,000 Marinites. And we are responsible for protecting and preserving 22,000 acres of watershed land. Where our water comes from, it's all locally sourced. So 75% of our water supply comes from reservoirs up on Mount Tam and in West Marin. And then the other 25% comes from Sonoma County's Russian River water system. And so when we hear about the wonderful snowpack and ski opportunities up in the Sierras, that's not benefiting our local water supply. You know, all of our water comes from right here in the North Coast region. And as you may be aware, 2020 was the second driest year in 90 years. And this year, we've only had 20 inches of rainfall to date. And usually we receive about 52 inches up in Lake Lagunitas. So we're 44% of historical average of rainfall for this time of year. And as a result of that lack of rainfall, our current water supply storage capacity is at 55%. Normally on March 31st, April 1st, we're at about 90%. So we're quite concerned about water supply as we move into, essentially the spring and summer. So as a result of the lack of rainfall and the concerning water supply conditions, on February 16th, our board of directors approved a resolution declaring a drought, calling for voluntary actions and asking all of our customers to conserve water. We acknowledge that without significant rainfall in another March miracle, as we've seen in years past, it would be likely that we'd be going into mandatory restrictions. And as we all know, We did not receive significant rainfall in the month of March, and there's really no rainfall on the horizon that will get us out of the current conditions that we're quite concerned about. So as part of this voluntary action, which we're currently in, we are pushing out lots of information around conservation and opportunities for folks to save. We have tips that are out there that we push through social media and various other avenues. We have a new ad campaign that just launched yesterday. Well, nope, sorry, Friday, around saving water, and we also have some new programs that I'll touch on in a moment. We're asking customers really to focus on opportunities that they may be aware of to reduce use. So finding leaks and fixing them. Gray water is a drought-proof water supply source. So taking your water from your clothes washer and using that for your landscape irrigation is a great opportunity that we are actually providing incentives for as well. In addition, simple things like using a broom instead of a hose, or turning off the water when you brush your teeth, or turning off the water when you do the dishes and not just letting it run. It seems simple. It seems like it's not going to have much of an impact, but really what it does is increase the water awareness. The more we start thinking about how we use water, the more we are aware we are of how we use water, and then we find more ways to save, and that's where we really see impact. As I mentioned, we do have some new programs, incentive programs, and other program offerings that we're pushing out to customers to help them assist us with reducing demand. So phone consultations to look at how folks use water in their home and if there's an opportunity to reduce that water use. A free shut-off nozzle, so a hose in, goes on the end of your hose. So if you need to water your plants, et cetera, you can get one of those for free, as well as shower heads and faucet aerators. We've also rolled out some new incentives. So if folks are considering removing their lawn, there's a lawn replacement program. There's actually a rebate program. You get $1 per square foot rebate for removing lawn, or we have a delivery program where customers can actually have sheet mulching materials delivered. So that would be compost, cardboard, and mulch. And so for those DIYers, have an opportunity to take their lawn out on their own. We have smart irrigation controllers incentives, which is, those of you who are familiar with a Nest, you can actually control your irrigation system with your cell phone, which is kind of a cool opportunity. It tells you when it's turning on and when it's turning off, and it even can some of them can measure flow to tell you if you should be concerned about any leaks in your system. And you can see their gray water kits for installation. Those gray water systems, rain barrels and cisterns, which are great, except we're kind of out of the rainy season. So you have to hold off on that one until next fall, and then clothes washers, of course. So we have a number of resources that we're pushing out, not only those rebates I just mentioned, but really trying to just bring awareness to of drought conditions. So we have yard signs. Hopefully you've seen some in your community. They're bright blue signs that say drought is here, save water. We have brochures that we're pushing out to libraries and other community groups to help get the word out. And then all of our information is also available on our website. So marinwater.org/conserve is where you can go to see current reservoir levels. You can see program offerings or rainfall stats, et cetera. All of that's kind of being directed there. In addition, Water Watch is really important. So we're really leaning hard on during this voluntary effort on educating around water waste, right? So most people don't want to be water wasters. They don't know that they're gutter flooding when they turn their sprinklers on, or they may not know that there's limitations on watering times during the day. So for example, there's actually an ordinance that states you shouldn't run your sprinklers, or you can't run your sprinklers from between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. And there's really a lack of awareness there. We're really trying to increase, community education around the restrictions that are currently in place while we're doing this voluntary effort, so that when we do move into that mandatory level, there's already a base level of awareness. And part of that is working with our friends and neighbors to help educate them on what opportunities there are to reduce waste, reduce gutter flooding, appropriate irrigation, et cetera. So we do have a water waste form on our website, as well as phone number and email for folks to give us a call if there's questions or comments that they want to share. I do want to acknowledge that this evening we have a board meeting as well, and generally one of our Marin Water Board of Directors would be in attendance, but they're currently in closed session, so they couldn't be here, but they do send their regards. And we are taking up tonight looking at mandatory measures at least an initial look at what those mandatory measures might look like. And we anticipate at the end of the month on April 20th, we'll be rolling out some additional restrictions really focused on targeting landscape irrigation even further. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have. And here's my comment.
Carrie, thank you. Thank you so much. That was a really informative and concise presentation. And I fear that we're in for a rough summer between the lack of water, any mandatory restrictions, and then also the attendant fire season. So thanks for sharing that with us. I just have one question, then we'll turn it over to other council members for questions and then the public. Actually, I've got two questions. The first, could you tell us a little bit more about incentives for gray water systems? Those, I think, my impression is that they're not terribly cheap. And so I think there could be a price barrier there for residents. I know that my family would certainly be interested in doing a gray water system, but I think cost is a concern.
Sure. So what we're doing right now with gray water is we have workshops we're doing through the Urban Farm Store. And if you attend a workshop, then you get a $100 discount on all the supplies you need to install a laundry to landscape gray water system. It would cost you about $60 for your investment. But they also have toolboxes that they'll loan you all the tools and everything you need for the installation. And part of the webinar that we require you attend actually walks you through how to do the installation. So you have a good understanding of what it takes, and they're there to also provide help too if there's additional direction that's needed.
Great, thank you. And then my one other question, I don't know if you're able to shed any light on this, but we often argue in my family about whether it's more water efficient to wash dishes by hand or by loading up the dishwasher. Obviously, loading the dishwasher, not running it until it's full, but do you have any guidance on that for residents?
So, and that's always a good one. So if you fill a bucket in your sink and you use the water from the bucket to hand wash, and then all you do is rinse, that's your most efficient way. The next is your dishwasher full load, and then the last most wasteful, least efficient is, washing from the sink, just obviously letting the water run.
Very helpful, thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to the other council members. Any questions for Carrie here? Yeah, Leela.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Carrie, thank you for this presentation. It's really helpful. I just wanted to follow up on actually a question that Eli asked about the gray water. Does that only pull water from your washing machine? Because what if you have an HE washer? Does that mean that you're not going to get that benefit?
You'll still get the benefit. So it does only, so there's various types of gray water systems. So a laundry to landscape just pulls water from your clothes washer into your landscape. There's other systems where you can pull water from your shower, which requires, plumbing, and it's more invasive, but if it's a new construction, it's absolutely a great opportunity and what should be considered. Even if you have a high efficiency clothes washer, you're still using, 15 to 20 gallons of water for every load. And so that's, water that can go to your landscape, especially if you have fruit trees or other kind of, non-edible landscape that you want to, non-root edible landscape that, or plantings that you want to maintain during the drought.
Okay, great. And then my other question was just about your point you made about reporting waste. Mm-hmm. So I'm imagining some people might feel uncomfortable feeling like they're kind of telling on a neighbor. I just wonder if you could talk a little more about what will happen if you report someone.
Yeah, so that's great. So we obviously don't go and tell people, your neighbor turned you in. We look at it as an education opportunity. So if you were to report to me or through our site that you saw your neighbor, gutter flooding, we would send them a letter that says, perhaps you weren't aware of these restrictions, and we just want to bring it to your awareness. That's not considered like the first notice for water waste, because staff has to visually confirm that they've seen it, right? So we don't want to, of course, dismiss the report to say, and not do anything, but we also need to acknowledge that staff does need to visually confirm so that we don't get in the middle of, neighbor, issues. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. Great questions, Leela. Yeah, Bob.
When was the last time we had mandatory restrictions, and what do mandatory restrictions potentially look like? Thanks.
That is a great question. So I'm told in the 90s, we're seeing water supply levels like we saw in the 90s. There's a great graph they'll show tonight that shows our reservoir levels that the lowest it's been in since 1984, which is really frightening. But I understand in the 90s, we did have restrictions, and they actually had an allocation model. So they said, you know, each person could use so many gallons per day, and that was your allotment. At this point, we acknowledge that our next reservoir of water supply is our landscape water use, right? And so we don't know how many people are in a household, and that makes it difficult to assign an allotment. So we're looking at really targeting landscape irrigation. If you've seen any of our past 3 board meetings, we've really kind of narrowed in on a 1 day a week target irrigation schedule, meaning you'd be limited to 1 day a week of irrigation. Each community would be limited to 1 day a week of irrigation. The board has obviously not adopted that yet. It's still in development, but that's currently where we're focusing landscape irrigation. In addition, there'd be additional prohibitions such as not filling pools, swimming pools, and you know, not installing new landscaping, because a new landscape won't be able to survive with just 1 day a week of irrigation. And so we're really asking folks to postpone installation until after the drought ends, so that we can retain that water supply for you know, drinking water.
Important question, Bob. Thank you. Any other questions from council members before we open this up to the public? All right, if not, then we'll go ahead and open this up for members of the public to ask any questions to Carrie here regarding this presentation that we just got. Let me, oh, thank you, Rebecca, for switching that over. Okay, so if you've got any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org, and we'll start with Roy.
Good evening again. Carrie, thank you for the fine presentation. It's important to be mindful of water usage and use the water wisely. I have 3 slides to go through. They're rainfall stats. I think hopefully it's interesting. And then at the end, I have a question for Carrie. So the first slide is all Marin Municipal Water District data. And some of it can be found on the Water Watch site. Very nice. But here we see rainfall, and highlighted rainfall that's less than the last year's or 2020 rainfall. So you can see over the years that there's been different rainfall amounts in the decades. So this is a decade look per annual rainfall. And there's 6 decades where we've had less rainfall than in the 2011s to 2020. Maximum rainfall, 77.53 inches on average in 1800s. In the year 1896, if you can believe it, 122 inches, over 122 inches. And in 1899, almost 118 inches. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a chart showing, and I've filtered out the areas in low rainfall below 30 inches. So you can see in 2020, we had just a hair over 20 inches. In 2021, if you look at it in the first 3 months, at least we beat out 2020 rainfall in the first 3 months. And if Carrie had just taken the data back another decade, you can see in 1923 and 1929, 19 inches in each one of those years. So that's a look at the rainfall. And let's just go to the next slide. So I make the time. Okay, here, this is a slide that's a line chart. The water district has a bar chart, and you can see the rainfall amounts vary every year. Look in the 20s, the roaring 20s, very low rainfall amounts pretty consistently. And of course, in the 1800s, major rainfall. And so those, you can see the trend line. So the trend line kind of says, hey, we're kind of trending down in rainfall each year. So thank you. Carrie, the question is, what efforts have been made by the district to construct and put into production a desalination plant?
So yes, answer this question. Okay, let's see. So, you know, and I believe it was, you probably all know better than I, in the last 10, 15 years, within the last 10 to 15 years, there was a movement to install a desal plant within the district service area. And there was a decision made at that time that conservation was going to be the cheapest opportunity to reduce demand to where we would not need that new desal plant.
Great, thank you very much, Carrie, and thank you, Roy. I'm not seeing any other hands up right now for public comment. Rebecca, did we get any emails pertaining to this presentation?
That's interesting stuff.
No, we did not receive any emailed public comments.
Great, thank you. Then I will go ahead and close public comment. We'll bring it back to the council. Just any last comments before we thank Carrie here for her presentation?
If I may make a comment.
Yes,
so
please.
The city, of course, the town is one of our water customers, and so we want to continue collaborations as we progress through these mandatory restrictions, of course, acknowledging parks and opportunities to get the word out and just engage with all of you. So I'll of course reach out to city manager and follow up, and I really appreciate your time this evening.
Great, thank you so much, Carrie. We appreciate you being here and sharing that information with us, very helpful. That concludes our presentations and brings us to item 6, which is the consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been previously discussed and do not require further discussion. Any member of the council or public may pull an item from the consent calendar for discussion. We're going to start by asking if there are any members of the council who would like to pull any items from our consent calendar. And seeing none, we're going to turn this over to the public. If any members of the public would like to pull an item from our consent calendar or comment on the consent calendar, please go ahead and raise your hand.
Mayor Beckman, there are some hands up.
Oh, from the council? Sorry, I was missing that. Who?
No, from the public. About
Yes. So just going to the public right now. Again, if you'd like to comment on the consent calendar or pull an item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. We've got some hands up, so we're going to start with Anita and move on to Jeremiah.
Thank you, Mayor Beckman. Hello, everyone. Good evening, Corte Madera City Council leaders. I'm the main contact for the secondhand smoke complaints that arrive at our through the Smoke-Free Marin Coalition website in Marin County, and a former landlady, reluctantly. I want to respectfully request that you remove 6C ordinance number 1006 from the consent calendar to allow for public discussion. I don't know if I should speak now or explain why.
So Anita, I think what we'll do is we will pull 6C as you've requested. I think we'll go through the rest of the hands up and see if anybody wants to pull any additional items. And then if not, we'll move the balance of the consent calendar and come back to really dive into 6C and hear all the public comment on that. So sure, thank you, Anita. So with that, I'll just say, if anybody would like to pull any additional items from our consent calendar, so we've just pulled 6C. If anybody wants to pull anything additional, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. And I see one hand up from Herminia. So we are going to bring her on here. And Herminia, you should be able to speak. Looks like you're unmuted here. Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to take her off for now. So it looks like we've pulled 6C, so I'm going to bring it back to the council. Would somebody like to make a motion to move the consent calendar with the exception of 6C? Fred, thank you.
I'll go and make the motion.
Great, thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Bob. Rebecca, could we get a vote on items 6A, 6B, and 6D through G?
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you very much. So we're going to come back to item 6C now. This is consideration and possible adoption of ordinance number 1006 pertaining to prohibiting smoking in multi-unit housing. I think we'll start off turning this over to staff if there's any kind of introductory comments we want to make, and then we'll do the normal process of council questions, public comment, and then any council discussion.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I want to thank Amy Ackerman, our town attorney, and Rebecca Vaughn for writing the staff report and working on this ordinance. When this originally came to us, as you may recall, staff made, I think, and you'll hear from the comments today, and we had at previous meetings, had specific requests. And I believe that we've met the spirit of that request and staff supports that. One of the things that you're going to hear tonight, and you've heard in public comment in emails, was a specific section within the code. And the code, it's something that was carried over from the original ordinance and not something that we really highlighted or focused on when we brought this to council. And it's specific to the provision that basically smoking cannabis for medical purposes as permitted by California Health and Safety Code sections 11362.7 basically is an exemption from this ordinance and would technically be allowed as written now. Hearing those comments, getting back together amongst staff and legal counsel, staff supports removing that. I believe, you know, and when we really think back in time when this was originally approved, the focus was a little bit different than it is now. A lot of changes with edibles and a lot of changes with how people operate. I think staff agrees with some of the comments that we don't want to see this become a potential loophole around our ordinance, which it could. I also though want to highlight to the community and the council that it'll also potentially cause enforcement issues down the road in a much lower scale, but it'll be something that we'll have to be thoughtful in how we handle certain situations. But that aside, I think staff supports this amendment. The town attorney, Amy Ackerman, is prepared to show you that red line change if you so wish to do that and amend the ordinance, which we would then bring back to you, I believe, for 2 additional meetings. Is that correct, Amy? If we make it.
Because council adopted, introduced the ordinance and approved it upon first vote, I think what we need to do is take a motion for reconsideration from the council to reconsider that approval, and then just direct that we make the change, and then we would go ahead and need to publish again and take 2 votes on the amended ordinance, because it's important that we give proper notice. And while there are obviously people here today who want to remove that exception, it's possible there are other members of the public, and we need to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to have notice of this change and to speak on it if they're interested.
And I'll just only one last highlight, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, to that is that San Anselmo is one, and you'll see that in the, I believe we've provided that information, but San Anselmo has a similar ordinance. So the good news is it's not required, but it's helpful from an enforcement standpoint for Central Marin Police Authority for us to be the same amongst San Anselmo, Larkspur, and Corte Madera. So we would mirror San Anselmo, which is good. And then Larkspur will then potentially take this up after us and consider the same. And so I think that would be helpful for that council to make the decision as well, focusing on Corte Madera and Larkspur. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
That's great. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Amy. Any questions from the council before we turn this over to the public? My only question would be, Todd, you just mentioned that you were foreseeing potential slight enforcement issues. Just wondering if you could kind of elaborate on that for us.
I just always worry about equity now that we're talking about this, of how potentially, and I think like Amy said, let's give this a couple meetings just to make sure that if, you know, we're considering everything, let's see if there's another side of the story that we're missing. I definitely don't want to misstep there, you know, not understanding, potential costs between cannabis, edibles, and other things. I want to take that into consideration. I also, one of my concerns of whenever we pass a local ordinance that that is allowed statewide by state law, that always concerns me, because if you get into a situation of I think of possibly a senior person with injuries that are life-threatening, and they're smoking cannabis, and we get into a situation where we work hard for a year through Smoke Free, they do a great job, but we just can't mediate it. And you get into a situation where we have Central Marin Police Authority or code enforcement knocking at the door to issue citations in a situation like that. I think it potentially opens us up to litigation. Would we ultimately win that litigation? Yes, probably, but it would be costly. And I also think that it wouldn't be to the benefit of our time and resources as a whole. And so I just always think of worst case scenarios. But to the point of, I think some of the speakers and the emails that we've received, I think you also have to look at what's more likely. It's the loophole of people that are going to use medical cannabis as a get around to doing this. And it's going to cause problems. And that's what we're trying to stop. So I'm comfortable with this. I just always think about worst case scenarios and how I want to train and teach our people to respond and to enforce, educate, and move forward with any ordinance that we pass that meets your expectations. That's all.
That's helpful, Todd. Thanks for giving us that kind of fuller perspective there. Any other questions from council members? And if not, we're going to go ahead and open this up to members of the public. So if you'd like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. We're We're going to start with Anita and then move to Chidlali.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for allowing discussion on this. Again, as the person that's handling the complaints, the first contact in Marin County, I just am concerned that exemptions would make the ordinance unenforceable. And it's a really tough place to be in. Specifically, I've received a tidal wave of complaints during the pandemic because people are home and people are stressed, and people that had even quit, you know, smoking pot or smoking cigarettes are back at smoking them again. So, and I know that it's medical marijuana, but I myself got a card for medical marijuana back in 2008, and it took about 15 minutes and I was able to get different oils delivered to my home in no time at all. So I think that there are alternatives to be able to take tinctures, edibles, and other ways to deliver the dose that you need without needing to subject neighbors, including infants. I'm dealing with grandparents, cancer survivors, and even pets to dangerous and unpleasant secondhand smoke. I'm very aware that the Central Marin Police Authority has tried to be, really help with this, but they and even many of the property managers whom I call have told me that the ordinances need to be simple and clear or they're unenforceable. For example, when we have the 80% smoke-free versus the 100% smoke-free multi-unit housing in different parts of Marin, it makes it really difficult when you have the 80% to protect the elderly or the asthmatic tenant from drifting secondhand smoke. And as far as the equity issue goes, these folks I'm talking to do not have a lot of resources. They don't have the money to live in a house, but more importantly, they don't have the resources for first and last and, being able to pay the much higher rents compared to where they're currently at. So they're basically captives in their own homes. I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm just saying that those who are tasked with enforcing the regulations from all sides are unified in saying that loopholes can make the ordinances unenforceable and beyond frustrating to help for those of us who are fighting to help people to have the clean air in their units, in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. We're going to move on to Chidlali, followed by Jeremiah. And again, I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation. Oh, her hand just went down. So, oh, there she is. Okay. Oh, she's going up and down here.
Hello, thank you. Well, yes, my name is Chidlali. I wanted to speak on this, so thank you for giving me this space. I am reading from what I sent in, so I'm just gonna go from there. So I am in no way against the legal use of cannabis. In fact, I support the decriminalization of cannabis use. However, I think that it is important that it is used in a manner that does not hurt the health of others. I do support to remove the exemption that allows residents of multi-unit housing to smoke or vape medical cannabis. There are many alternatives for a person to legally consume CBD and THC products that do not explicitly put the health of neighboring residents at risk. Thank you for taking this into consideration. I hope that this is helpful to think about in a way, just because people's health is important. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We're gonna move on to Jeremiah, followed by Erminia.
Hi, Mayor Bateman and Council. Thank you very much for taking the time to rehear this important matter. I'm not gonna go through the email that I sent to you. Just want to highlight a couple of things. The study that I cited that was recently published shows that marijuana joint emissions are 3.5 times more potent than those that come from a Marlboro cigarette. If you're concerned, as I'm sure you are, about protecting those people who live in multi-unit housing from the drift that can occur through walls and ventilation systems, as well as can come from patios and balconies into the open windows of adjacent units, that it's important to recognize that this is a serious emissions problem. There are alternatives that do not involve vaping or smoking cannabis that are considered acceptable, and I sent the list of FDA approved products for legitimate medical purposes. It's very easy for anybody to get a medical marijuana card, and it would be extremely difficult for a tenant who lives adjacent to somebody to prove that that person is not actually using cannabis for legitimate medical purposes. And I can tell you that we personally, our family, was exposed repeatedly by adjacent neighbors who claimed that they were only burning incense. And you need to just make it very clear that you can't be smoking and vaping inside or around multi-unit housing of any type. And at the same time, you will have no problem balancing that with the legitimate health needs of people who are using the products as they're prescribed.
Great, thank you very much, Jeremiah. We're going to move on to Herminia, followed by Sarah.
Hello, Corte Madera City Council members and staff. My name is Herminia Costa, and I'm a high school student here in Marin County. Before I begin, I would like to thank you all for taking into consideration the concerns of me and my peers in the Youth Advisory Council. For those that live in multi-unit housings, where only 80% of the units are required to be smoke-free. Thank you for your support by increasing it to 100% so that everyone is safe from secondhand smoke, no matter what. Whereas I'm thankful for your effort in increasing protection for residents in multi-unit housings. I'm concerned for this negative impact that the exemption for medical cannabis could have in this ordinance. Currently, the ordinance is allowing residents to smoke and vape inside these residents. 614.110. Notwithstanding any other provision of this chapter, smoking marijuana for medical purpose as permitted by California Health and Safe Code Section 1136.2.7 et seq is not prohibited by this chapter. I would like that you all take in consideration that any adult in Marin County can request and order a medical marijuana card over the phone or online. This exemption is a concern to me because it will mean that essentially all units can be allowed to smoke or vape and harm other tenants with their secondhand smoke. Thank you all for considering my request to strengthen the secondhand smoke policy further so that there is no exemption to this rule that protects everyone in this residence. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to Sarah.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for your time tonight. My name is Syra, and I'm speaking on behalf of Emily Gallegos, whose phone died while on the Zoom call. She asked me to say this for her. Dear Corte Madera City Council and town staff members, my name is Emily Gallegos, and I am a proud member of the Youth Advisory Council, a sophomore at Redwood High School, and resident here in Corte Madera. My peers in the Youth Advisory Council have spoken very positively about their recent experiences speaking in our city council's meetings, and I feel encouraged to speak about my thoughts and personal experience on the matter of secondhand smoke in multi-unit housing. I have lived in multi-unit housing for 12 years, and for all of this time, I have known that my exposure to secondhand smoke was different than that of my peers, including children, adolescents, and families who don't neighbor so closely to others. I do not have the option to escape the smoke that is produced by my neighbors and allowed by the city town that I live in. The smoke produced by my neighbors can be inhaled by residents near us too. The chemicals in the smoke can greatly impact, the chemicals in the smoke can greatly impact residents with lung and health problems. Why should my and my neighbor's health be put at risk for someone to smoke? The state of California prohibits smoke within 20 feet from public and private property and buildings. This rule should be applied to multi-unit housing. Members of multi-unit housing all live together in one building, but it is still considered public property outside of your door. They need to be considerate of others and their health, and so should you. Even with up to 25 feet between you and someone with a lit cigarette, you could still breathe in 46% more of the particles compared to air without cigarette smoke. I realize you have expressed support to strengthen the secondhand smoke policy in multi-unit housing, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. However, I am aware that there is an exemption to smoke produced by medically allowed marijuana and cannabis in the Ordinance 614-110. And I'm writing to ask that you consider my concern about this and change this ordinance so that you prohibit secondhand smoke in all multi-unit housing in Corte Madera, no exceptions, so that my family and I don't have to suffer its harmful effects. Thank you for giving me hope that you will do your part in protecting everyone you can from this preventable harm. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you very much, Syra, and thank you, Emily, and my apologies again to everyone for my butchered pronunciations of your names. I don't see any other hands up right now. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments from folks who have not had a chance to speak yet?
It looks like another hand
yes.
just went up, but I did want to say that the council did public comment at tcmmail.org did receive 15 emails, all in support of removing the exemption, 2 of which were submitted before the council packet was published and were included with the packet. The other 12 were posted online and linked on the packet earlier today, and then the packet was republished and the link was sent out to council to review. And since then, we did receive 1 more emailed public comment from Maideli Reyes, also in support of removing the exemption, and that email will be added to the online archive of emails.
Great, thank you. Well, given the volume of emails there, we obviously won't be able to read them all, but they are all in the public record. And thank you, Rebecca, for summarizing for us that it sounds like they're all in support of making this change. And then we have a hand up from Pam Granger, so we're going to go to her next.
Good evening, Mayor Beckman, City Council. Pam Granger. I'm the chair of Smoke Free Marin Coalition. Obviously, from the sentiments already expressed, our public health side is really interested in making sure that one individual can't cause harm to a floor full of other residents. I just want to put this in perspective. It was already mentioned by the town manager that enforcement is really made easier if there's, to the extent that there's consistency. The policies with your neighboring communities, of course, make it easier on law enforcement. I worked for the American Lung Association for 15 years, so I followed 7 counties north of the Golden Gate Bridge. And Corte Madera has been right in there in terms of on top of things. As a matter of fact, you were an early adopter, and that's why you're having to make changes now, is that you were like top of the class a while back. So, and I apologize, as many ordinances as I've looked at, I didn't pick up on the fact that I was only seeing red line and not the whole ordinance and package. And if I had taken it out and compared it, I perhaps would have caught that earlier, back before you had your first reading. So I just hate it when we go, oopsies, you know, our mistake. So I think it's great. Thank you so much for reconsidering this. I can assure you that we have ways to help people who perhaps have difficulty in mobility, who perhaps need some other medical assistance. We don't want to see anybody out on the street, but what we really don't want is one person's relief to cause harm for dozens more. So thank you very much. Appreciate your reconsideration and support.
Great, thank you very much, Pam. And with that, I do not see any other hands up, so we will go ahead and close public comment on this item and bring this item 6C back to the town council for discussion and a possible motion. We'll start with Bob.
Yeah, Amy, help me out here if I got the language right, but I will move that we reconsider our approval of the ordinance.
I think that's great.
Thank you.
And then if you want, and then you can direct that the change be made.
At the same time?
I can do that. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's fine. If you don't get a second, then we'll go back and undo it.
Okay, then I would also recommend that we make the changes as directed by staff to ban smoking of cannabis in multi-unit as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. And Leela, would you like to second that?
Yes, I would.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, could we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you very much. That concludes the consent calendar and brings us to item 8, our business items, as there are no public hearings tonight. First business item, item 8A, is consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 14/2021, approving a reserve policy. And I will turn it over to Daria.
Thank you, Mr. Members of the council. Can I start off I want to appreciate Daria. She wrote the staff report and she put this all together, but we also, a lot of work to get here. And I want to, Rebecca, if you can, for this item and the next item, I want to make I call them the dream team. I want to make them available to council should you have any questions with the next 2 items. And so part of that team, again, is he's already on our council, but it's council member Casissa and the rest of our finance subcommittee. It's Craig Hill and Mike Meyer will be representing us today. They're our financial experts with NHA advisors. You have Daria, our finance director. And then on the call, if we can bring over Larry Reed and Carl Spurzum. And we also have Annette DeSano and James Andrews that are part of our subcommittee, but I'm not seeing them on the call. So if you are on the call, the 2 of you could raise your hand and we'll bring you over as well.
James Andrews is on the call.
Okay.
I'll bring him over.
And so just to set this up as Daria goes through, because Daria can always take complex issues and succinctly, way better than me, explain it to all of us so we all understand it. So, but this is really critical. So when we talk about the next item and really everything we do, it's backing up our practices, setting up council for decision-making with our finances. And really what we're trying to do is we've done a great job over the past few years building up multiple reserve funds. And so now what we want to do is we want to increase those or memorialize them in a resolution of really setting the expectation of what those reserve funds should be. As an example, we're going to go from a 10% reserve to a 20% reserve. We're going to memorialize the sales tax measure reserve of 2.5 million. We're going to memorialize the $2.5 million reserve for the sanitary district. And then on the pension obligation bond discussion, you know, what we'll hear on the next item, it's really, you know, taking an opportunity here and really setting up an annual savings. It's not really, it's a savings arbitrage on an annual basis. And then back that up in annual decision-making for the council at the recommendation of the sales tax subcommittee of, and this policy will do it, of what you want to do if you have an arbitrage savings on any given year moving forward. And so where should that money go? And it'll help the council in their decision-making. It's transparent. Everybody in the community can understand it and understand what we're doing. It's a really important step. And I think it's one of the last steps to memorialize all of our efforts. And then going forward, it sets the stage for the future evolution of leaders to maintain our funds and really follow best practices. And with it, the team is on here. This team has evaluated it. They provided recommendations. This is all I'm going to contribute to this conversation because I think you really need to hear from them. And so they're available to you now. And I want Daria, if you could, just walk us through the mechanism of the various funds and what we're thinking. And then council, you have the team available to you if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Todd, and good evening, Mayor and Town Council members. As Todd said, this item concerns the town's reserve policy and staff's recommended changes to the policy. And as you've seen from the staff report, there are 3 portions of this reserve policy that are being addressed. The first is the operating fund reserve. And the operating fund is where all of the revenues and expenditures related to the day-to-day running of the town are recorded. Currently, the town has a 10% operating reserve, and the 10% refers to the total expenditures and transfers out in that fund for a fiscal year. And as of the close of the last fiscal year, which was in June of 2020, that reserve, that 10% operating reserve, was approximately $2.1 million. And 10% is less than about a month and a half's worth of expenditures, which is why we're recommending increasing it. The total operating funds ending balance as of last June was about $6.4 million. As I've said, that 10% reserve, it was $2.1 million. That was part of the 6.4 total. And then there is about a $2 million deficit in the Park Madera Center fund, which the operating fund would be responsible for. So that leaves about, there was about $2.3 million in unassigned funds currently. So staff is recommending increasing the operating reserve to 20% of annual operating expenditures and transfers out. And in order to meet this 20% reserve, this would be the goal, 20%, staff is recommending that all future operating surplus funds be transferred to this 20% reserve. And the operating surplus is determined at the end of the year. It's the amount by which revenues exceed expenditures after any transfers to other funds, such as the insurance fund or other funds that don't have any revenue of their own and are supported by the operating fund. After those are made, then any operating surplus would be transferred to the 20% reserve. That would be half of any surplus. And the remaining half could be transferred to any one of the other trust funds. The town has a pension trust fund, which is not included in that operating reserve, and also has an OPEB, other post-employment benefits trust, which is not part of that. Or the town council could approve any other town expenditure to be used with excess revenue. And so just as an update, the town has been informed that they will receive approximately $1.8 million in federal money as part of the American Rescue Plan. And we're expecting to receive half of these funds in the current fiscal year and half in the following fiscal year. But regardless of when they are received, staff is recommending that $300,000 of those funds be deposited into the Park Madera Center Fund, which would help offset the deficit and also losses that have been incurred this year due to the COVID-19 situation. And then the remaining funds, staff is recommending be designated toward the 20% reserve. The second reserve, as mentioned in the staff report, is the sales tax reserve. And that is an emergency reserve. And there is a $2.5 million reserve in that fund. And that would not change as a result of this policy. The $2.5 million emergency reserve would remain. And then the third portion of the staff report concerns the pension reserve. And following this item, there'll be a discussion regarding pension obligation bonds, which is involved in this reserve as well. The town, as the staff report explains, there's approximately $21.4 million in unfunded liability for pension that the town has obligations towards. And the town doesn't have a whole lot of control over that liability that's been increasing. It has to do with actuarial assumptions that change as determined by CalPERS and the discount rate being lowered. But the staff has taken several steps, the town has, in order to address that liability. One is to open up that Section 115 trust, that pension stabilization trust. There's currently about $3.8 million in that trust, and that can only be used to pay retirement obligations. It can't be used for anything else. Additionally, what are referred to as classic PERS members, those members that are in the town's miscellaneous 2.5% plan, pay an additional 5.5% of their salary towards the employer's employer contribution for CalPERS, as well as paying the employee portion of 8%. So those people, those employees pay 13.5% of their salary for CalPERS obligations. And then the fire department, which is now all employed by Central Marin Fire Authority, which the town is a member of that JPA, was able to reform its CalPERS pension plan when the Corte Madera employees moved over to that plan. And they are now at a 3% at 55 plan rather than a 3% at 50 plan. And they are also paying an additional 6% of their salary towards the employer share, as well as their 9% employee share. So they're paying 15%. Those are the classic members, people who were hired before a certain date, before the law required changes in the pension plan. So the reserve being proposed has to do with the pension obligation bonds, which will be discussed shortly. But this would require the town to budget the net annual savings to be expended on the town's unfunded pension or retiree health obligations. And this could include the OPEB trust, which is for retiree health benefits and has about $3.7 million in it currently and is funded, about 1/3 funded. Or it could pay CalPERS directly to pay down any unfunded liability that remains after the pension, if the pension obligation bonds are issued. And of course, in the event of economic hardship or emergency, the council would be able to make an emergency declaration to use the net savings for another purpose. The Finance Committee would review this annually, this policy. Just for information, the current trust account can be used to make CalPERS unfunded liabilities, or could also pay the CalPERS normal costs. So just to sort of recap, the establishment of these reserve policies would be that the operating fund reserve would increase by approximately $2 million. And the timeline on this is dependent on future reserves, future surplus revenues that would be put towards those reserves. The Corte Madera sales tax reserve, which is mostly used for capital projects, that would remain unchanged. And if the town does issue pension obligation bonds, the initial savings are thought to be about $300,000 to $450,000 in the first year, which would be next year, and average $660,000 to $815,000 through 2036, depending on the structure that the town council selects. So the savings would be deposited into one of the town's trust funds or paid to CalPERS to reduce the liability. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Daria and Todd and our Finance Committee. Do we have any questions from council on this item? Yeah, Fred.
Yeah, just Todd, can you just kind of put this in perspective? 20% on the operating fund, is that usually what other towns and cities are doing?
Yes, it's the standard which we all try to, at least at a minimum, reach. It's a best practice.
Okay. And then the other question is also, it looks like we're short, I want to say 2 million in the operating reserve, which we would pull $1.5 million from the funds that we would be getting. So we'd still be short about 500,000. I know you probably don't know, but do you know how long it would take to fund that 500,000 if we're taking it from, at the end of the fiscal year? I know it's hard to predict. I mean, 3 years, 5 years, I don't know what the past history is.
I think what staff is going to come back to you on is, Daria mentioned it. We currently, from a previous two surpluses, have $2.1 million in the general fund that is unobligated. And what we want to do is staff is going to take a portion of that and move it. We have a number of we have some monies that she outlined. I think we'll have the ability to fully fund the 20% at the end of this fiscal year.
Okay. And just so that people have an understanding, even after reserves, it doesn't affect capital improvement projects. It doesn't affect budget. I just want to make sure it's clear. So I want to say people on the call or in the public know that there's no effect on budget, staffing levels, improvement, capital improvement, nothing, everything is kind of like, I want to say status quo going forward.
Yeah, so one of the things of, this is for the next conversation too, of like, we really try to first attack the unfunded liability problem, as well as the capital improvement projects that we promised our community with the sales tax measure. And so as you know, on previous reports in the last few meetings, it's available, I believe, on the website. We have a 15-year revenue plan. If you take out the sanitary district, it's approximately $98 million dedicated to capital improvement projects over the next 15 years. And so this in no way is this funding towards capital improvement projects, per your question, is not being used in any way here. We've separated them out. So two different things, totally separate, and it has no effect on capital improvement projects.
Great, thank you, Fred. Any other questions from council members before we turn this over to the public? And I am not seeing, where's Charles? There he is. Not seeing any. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open this up to public comment. Anybody who'd like to comment on this reserve policy, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org, and we'll give speakers 3 minutes apiece. And while we wait to see if anybody puts their hands up, Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments on this?
We did not receive emailed comments on this item.
Great, thank you. And oh, let's see, I am seeing a hand up from Jim Andrews. So no public comment. So we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion, and we'll start with Jim.
You have to unmute, Jim.
I'd like to speak in support of increasing these reserves. One thing that almost all the council members are relatively new to the council, and if you talk it over with the town manager, he'll be able to tell you that like almost 10 years ago, we were in a situation where we did not have the ready cash to meet a bond coupon payment. We had to take out an emergency loan from a neighboring town. And with this current reserve policy, we should never be in that situation again. In fact, with these reserves, we could even repay the favor if they ever ran into difficulty by lending them some money for a short period of time. So, that's sort of the thought process behind all this reserving.
Great, thank you very much, Jim. And it looks like Carl, also on our finance committee, would like to speak as well.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Jim just said. I think in the 30 years I've been here, the town has idled along, and Todd came in saddled with quite a load of issues. And I think the pension stabilization fund, I think what Jim talked about, dealing with our town finances broadly, I just throwing out a big kudos to Todd and the team. So Todd and the team, pardon me. So excited to see the direction we're going in. That's it.
Great, thank you, Carl. And I'll just say, I just want to thank, again, our staff, Todd, our finance staff, and our finance committee for working on this. I'm a huge yes on this. I just want to open this up to any other council members for any other comments, or if not, a possible motion. Yeah, Fred? Yeah, I too would like to thank the finance committee. I think Todd calls them the dream team, and I think it is really the dream team. I also want to thank, I think, past, I want to say councils, maybe the last 5 or 6 years that had the foresight to look to the future for us to be able to get to this point where we have enough reserves. And we're in a much better financial situation. And we're able to weather COVID without taking any hits. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve the reserve policy. Thank you very much, Fred. Do we have a second? Great, thank you, Bob. And Rebecca, could we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Monken?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you very much. That concludes item 8A and brings us to item 8B, which is discussion regarding 2021 pension obligation bonds, restructuring options and process update. And I will turn it over to staff and I believe our consultants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I just want to set this conversation up, and I think it would be helpful for the council in your decision making this way. Just really briefly, this is an item that staff and the finance subcommittee have discussed over the past 2 years. With the recent change in rates, interest rates, it provided an option to really build, to restructure our unfunded liability, and then through policy, which you just approved, allow us an opportunity with one of the last tools in the toolbox to really fight unfunded liability and attack this thing. And so we came to council, we held a workshop with the council and the finance subcommittee on October 27, 2020 to really start this discussion publicly and have the discussion with council. We came back to you in November, which council ultimately approved us to continue to move forward with the validation court process and to continue to analyze this and work with the finance subcommittee. That work has been done. The validation process is complete. We are now coming back to you. We've worked with the finance subcommittee and we've also done a series of stress testing scenarios to help us with our decision making. And really, we have a presentation that I want to turn over to Craig Hill and Mike Meyer with NHA advisors to walk you through a PowerPoint of what our analysis has been over the past few months. And really, we're focusing our decision making on a couple of things here. So we've narrowed it down to 2 funding options, a 20-year and a 24-year funding option. Our current amortized payment plan for CalPERS is 24 years. So we did one at 24 years and we did one at 20. And so we want to talk about the pros and cons related to stress testing with you. So that's a decision point for council to consider. And the second one is we've had a lot of discussion on should we fully fund upfront with the bonds what our unfunded liability is today, approximately $21 million, like Daria said in the previous item. And so what you're going to hear from us is, I think we're going to recommend that we not fully fund it, but we fund up to a 94% possible range and not to overfund this issue. And there's a bunch of scenarios and discussion to have with that. And really, after you hear the presentation from Mike Meyer and Craig Hill, I want to turn it over to our 3 finance subcommittee members, Larry Reed, Jim Andrews, and Carl Spurzum. And I want you to ask them questions, but to hear their perspective on how they are considering this and thinking about this. They're really smart at this, really thoughtful, and I think it'll help you maybe come to a decision or a recommendation for staff moving forward. And with that, if you have no questions, I'd like to turn it over to Mike Meyer and Craig Hill.
Thanks, Todd, and good evening, Mayor, council members. Nice to be with you again virtually. Give me 1 second here. I'm gonna share my screen. Is everybody seeing this? Thumbs up? Yep, okay, perfect. So as Todd mentioned, this has been something that the town has been discussing. It sounds like for almost 2 years now. I know we were engaged last summer, talked a lot with the finance committee through workshops and then the council last fall. And as Todd mentioned, the validation process started in around November, December. That has run its course. I think there's one last appeal period, but the reason why we're bringing this back now is that we want to put the town in position to take advantage of the market if it still looks favorable once that appeal process is done, which is going to be around late April, we think, at the earliest. So during this time, we've been working through, I know Todd mentions we have a couple options for the council to look at tonight. We've probably worked through a dozen or more options, just different sizes, different shapes. What you'll see tonight have been kind of refined through discussions with Todd and Daria in terms of meeting certain objectives of the town. We've rounded out the financing team with other team members. The legal team has been building out the legal documents that will go to investors should you pursue that route. We also have a call scheduled with the credit rating agencies to really talk about the strides that the town's made over the last few years. That's scheduled for later this week. And then obviously Todd and Daria just talked about the new pension policy. So we have about 15 slides. Cut me off if we're going too long, but really the main purpose of this presentation, because we haven't been in front of you for 4 or 5 months, is to give you an update on the market. It's been extremely volatile since the election. We have the 2 scenarios to walk through, the pros and the cons. As you know, risk is a core component of any pension obligation bonds in terms of reinvestment risk by CalPERS, because your savings is really dependent on how they do in the future. And so what we did was we looked at some more dire type scenarios with the POB, such as, you know, what if there's another recession? What if CalPERS only earns 5.5% instead of 7%? You know, what does that look like for the town moving forward with and without a POB? So the next couple slides are on the market. There's been about 40 pension bonds issued over the last year. Rates have ranged from about 2.5% up to 4.25%. There were 5 cities that came in February that kind of lucked out with market timing. They achieved a sub 3% rate, and we'll get into kind of a market update. We've seen a lot of volatility. I think when we were in front of you last fall, we were looking at rates in the high 3s, around 3.75. That came down for a brief stint to the mid to high 2s. And we're probably hovering a little over 3% right now. So still quite a bit lower than where we were last fall. Let me just minimize my box here. So slide 4 is just a historical look at taxable Treasury rates. So this is the indice that pension obligation bonds are based off of. So historically speaking, you can see that we are at fairly relatively low levels, but we have seen an increase over the last several months just with the stimulus bill and inflationary concerns. On the flip side, and in favor for the town, is what's called a tightening of credit spreads. And so this is essentially the risk component of what an investor will purchase your bonds for. So what they do is they look at the taxable Treasury rate, and then they assign a penalty on top of that for the risk that they think they're taking. And so last year, when we were looking at all the POB issuances and we were in front of you, most of the spreads or the penalty above Treasury rates was above 200 basis points. So over 2% of what the Treasury levels were. So this chart going from left to right really shows most of the POBs that have been issued since last May. And you can see in the orange line, that corresponds to the axis on the right side. That's the spread above Treasury rates. And you can see that for the most part, last year, those spreads were over 200 basis points or 2.0%. And then early this year, they came down to under 1%. So you see Chula Vista, City of Orange, City of Huntington Beach, the spreads on those POBs were 90, 85, and 94 basis points respectively. So we've seen a huge decrease in these spreads, which is really driven by investors becoming more comfortable with pension bonds. So they're not placing so much risk on them. And then also just more demand than supply. So there's a lot of investors that are hungry for these bonds. So on a net basis, in terms of what that means for Corte Madera, as I mentioned, we were staring at rates in the high 3s last fall. As you'll see in our analysis coming up, we're currently estimating the low 3s. That reduction is largely due to the fact that credit spreads have tightened over 1%, even though Treasury rates have gone up 65 basis points. And I do want to note that these rates move around pretty quickly. So there is still a lot of volatility in the market. So we're trying to be, a lot of times we'll be very conservative, but because we're so close to talking to the rating agencies and doing the stress testing and going to market, these are pretty on market rates as of now. As Todd mentioned, the two options that we have narrowed it down to with staff are essentially keeping the same term of 2045, and then one that shortens the term of the town's pension debt to 20 years. You could see in this chart, the blue bars, this is a chart that you have seen before. This is the current repayment schedule for the $21.5 million unfunded liability. So again, it's characterized by some pretty steep increases followed by a drop off in 2036. On the sizing, as Todd mentioned, one thing that we wanted to take into account is really reducing the risk of the pension plans becoming overfunded. And so this happens if, if the town theoretically were to fund 100% of the UAL, and over the long haul, CalPERS actually earns above 7%, there would be some surplus in that account that you would not really get credit for. And so for that reason, a lot of agencies bring their funding ratios up into the mid 90 percentile. Some do fund 100%, and those are agencies that believe it's highly unlikely that CalPERS will earn above 7%. I do want to note that there's two impacts to this funding ratio, and one of them, or actually both of them, are recent returns by CalPERS. So the one thing that will hit the town in the next couple of years is the 4.7% returns from last year, and then the very good year that CalPERS is having this year. So we do, right now, CalPERS is at about 15 or 16% by our calculations, which means that if the town were to say do 100% funding of the UAL, in a year or two, that 15% good year is going to hit and you're going to be overfunded. And so really the sizing that we're looking at right now has the town refinancing about 88% of the UAL, which will bring the funding ratio to the mid 90s. Once that good year hits, you'll still be in the high 90s. You won't go above 100. So obviously you do have the option of going smaller or larger. But right now, that is the rationale behind the sizing of the POB. So on slide 8, quick summary of the estimated savings.
Downstairs. Do you want to go upstairs with Daddy?
Was there a question?
Oh. No, I think we're just getting some background noise.
Oh, got it. Okay, sorry about that. So this is a summary matrix of the estimated savings. If you look over to the right in the box, again, the purple is the 20-year, the orange is the 24-year, and both of them have an $18.8 million funding, which is 88%. You can see there's a slightly higher interest rate associated with the longer maturity. So 3.01 to a 3.18. As rates move up and down, that differential probably won't change much. So about 20 basis points there. Present value savings, when you discount it at that bond rate, is between 6 and 7 million. And as I mentioned, one of the benefits of the 20 years, a slightly lower interest rate and more cumulative savings over the long haul. The benefit of the 24-year, while you do pay slightly higher on interest, it does allow you to bring down your annual payment to a lower level. So if you look at the chart prior in the orange line there, that payment level for the town is quite a bit lower. So what that does mean is that it does give you some more capacity to absorb some future shocks. And so that's something we like to bring up, because it's very easy to say, well, let's go for the lower interest rate because it's 0.2% lower. But I think through some of the stress testing, you'll see having the capacity and more resiliency to absorb those shocks is also important for long-term financial management. And I do want to note, if I didn't say it before, that all of these options assume that the town can pay this debt off after 10 years. So maybe even 9 years if we can get investors to accept a shorter call, but you will have flexibility to pay this debt off early or refinance it if rates are still low, 10, 15 years down the road. So essentially you could effectively turn this into a 20-year or a 15-year deal, either one of these, by paying it off early. You'll have that flexibility. So as I mentioned, the previous page is kind of a status quo type scenario. It assumes CalPERS does earn their target of 7% every year into the future. And so that's the base case that we just went through. And so what we wanted to do was look at some more pessimistic scenarios. And so the stress test, and let me back up 1 second. We worked with the town's actuarial consultant. The town did bring on GovInvest. I think, Todd, probably in the last year or two, their software helps with general modeling, sensitivity analyses. They also specialize in doing stress testing for pension obligation bonds. So they were also part of this team. The stress test, the first one we did was, we made the assumption that CalPERS reduces their discount rate to 6.5% from their current 7% next year. And they also earn 6.5% over the long haul. The second stress test was a little bit more pessimistic than that. So we assumed that in every year, CalPERS earns 5.5% instead of their target of 7%. And then we looked at an even more dire scenario where there's another 2008 recession right after you do a POB. So if you recall, when you give CalPERS money, you will have more assets invested. So you will be more exposed to near-term gains and losses. And so we wanted to look at an 2008 recession scenario. What that means is that in the first couple of years, there's about a 29 to 30% downturn, followed by a couple good years of 10, 12%, and then a flat year, which is what the 2008 through 12 period looked like before reverting to 7%. And then we even went a step further. This was our analysis, but just to look at, at what point, how big of a market crash or negative return by CalPERS in the first year could you sustain before you were actually worse off having done the POB. So that's kind of our break-even market crash analysis. So on each of these slides, what you're going to see is on the left side, there's the 20-year option, and on the right side, there's the 24-year option. And in blue, this would be your payments to CalPERS without doing a POB. So that's why you see that hump, that peaking shape there. That's your current shape, but it's lifted higher because, during any of these stress tests, you're going to be worse off either way. You're going to be slightly worse off, a little more UAL added after the POB. And so in the dotted line, this would be your new payments after the POB. And so you can see that in this stress test number 1, savings is reduced by a little under $1 million versus the base case. Still significant savings in the first 15, 16 years, with the dotted line being below the blue line. As you go to the stress test number 2, this is where CalPERS earns 5.5% for 25 years. You can see that the savings gets reduced by a little bit more. So going down by about 1.7 million. So on a present value basis, going from 5.2 down to 3.6 on the 20-year, and down from 5.7 to 4.1 on the 24-year. What we've also shown you is the savings for those first 15 years, which is really where the savings are optimized, and really is what's driving the town's future ability to fill up these different reserve buckets. Because what you'll notice in all these stress tests is that even under some of the more dire scenarios that we'll get to, there's still a good amount of savings in the early years, which will give the town the ability to bolster these reserves. And if there is a downturn, to use that money to actually address the new UAL that's going to come online, which will happen if there is a downturn. So the stress test number 3, and this is getting close to, kind of a break even, is another 2008 recession immediately after the POB. So starting next year. In this case, savings is reduced by a good amount, especially on the 22-year, down to barely positive 150,000. You can see that even through the first 15 years, that goes from about 9.9 million down to 3 million. And then on the 24-year, drops from 5.7 to a little under $1 million on a present value basis. And then the savings in the orange box there on the bottom for the first 15 years drops from 12.2 to 5.6 million. So this is where you can see a little bit more resiliency with the 24-year option, still maintaining about 5.5 million of savings, even under a 2008-like recession, versus 3 million under the 20-year option. The break even that we ran, we estimate that it would take close to a 28 to 29% negative return in the first year with no recovery after that to really wipe away the present value savings that we're estimating. So that means that if CalPERS were to have an even worse year than that, if they go out and lose 40% in the very first year with no recovery, that would put the town worse off. So that just gives you some level of magnitude to kind of your downside risk with this type of transaction. As Daria and Todd mentioned earlier, the new reserve policy it is an enhancement, obviously on the operating side, taking it up to 20%. But part of that policy is also budgeting these annual savings, which range from about 600 to 800 to deploy into these different pension and OPEB trusts. So what that does is give you the resources if there is a downturn to really redeploy that into the market and address the new liabilities that will come online. As I mentioned, we are going to the credit rating agencies later this week. And so this is something we will be highlighting a lot, is this enhancement to the policy, both on the operating side, but also just kind of a multi-pronged plan to address pension and OPEB, which is really the biggest liability for nearly every city statewide. I think from our standpoint, both are strong and viable options. If we were to recommend the 20 versus the 24 year, we would probably recommend the 24-year option just from the standpoint of the lower annual payment level. So that gives the town some more budgetary flexibility, gives you more capacity to absorb shocks in the future. And at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, there is a flexible prepayment. So if you did down the road build up sufficient reserves and you wanted to turn this into a 15-year transaction and just pay it off, you could do that. And so really it just gives you some added flexibility there. Let me look at what else is on this slide. I think I already talked about that in terms of the ability to build funds, especially in the first 10 to 15 years. I do want to reiterate that the way CalPERS future returns works is that there is a delay on the impact of when it will hit the town. So that means that if they do have a down year, that new UAL hit will take about 2 years to hit your actuarial report. And then there's a 5-year ramp up in payments. So a lot of this near-term savings is guaranteed, not all of it, but a lot of it is. And so to the extent that you are putting in place these policies to lock that up, that's going to put you in solid position to address future liabilities if there are downturns in the future. So in terms of our schedule, as I mentioned, there is a meeting with S&P scheduled later this week. The town will still have the chance for final approval of the transaction, in which you'll be reviewing the POS, which is the prospectus that would go out to investors should you approve that. We do expect the validation to be complete late April. We were hoping it would have been a little sooner, but with COVID, the courts have been jammed a little bit. In terms of locking interest rates, we will be doing that as quick as possible should the council approve the financing. And once validation is done, the goal is really to be able to get out into the market once that validation period is done. And so I'm gonna, that wraps up my portion. I don't know, Todd or Craig, if you want to add anything that I may have missed.
But Craig, do you have any other comments? Thank you, Mike. Great presentation as always.
No, I think that's right. Mike, you've covered everything we wanted to try to get out on the table tonight.
Thank you. And so, Council, if you allow me, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to turn it over to our 3 community member experts. They've worked really hard on this as well. And also some of this information is new to them because the last time we spoke, we hadn't had the stress testing analysis regarding the discussion of how would we consider a 20-year bond measure to a 24. So I'd like to turn it over to you all and provide any comments or any information you think would be helpful for the council.
I can start. I started out as a skeptic of this proposal, more for philosophical than for financial reasons, but the economics of this are very compelling. And I think the point has been made by Todd and by Mike that this is not without risk, but the scenarios where this isn't beneficial to the town are fairly remote, are certainly unprecedented historically. I've looked at CalPERS returns, and if you look at any long period, 12, 15, 20 years, it's hard to find returns below, 5 or 6%. And with a 3-point-something financing cost, again, anything can happen. But if you look at any period of history, it would be unprecedented to get that kind of poor performance over a long period of time from CalPERS. And I just want to compliment Todd and Daria, because I feel like this has been a very systematic process going through, and I think at every point they were asking the right questions. And so I think that, tonight's presentation, I think, shows that.
Great, thank you, Larry. And did we have any other members of our finance committee that wanted to share their insights here?
I'll just jump in, Jim. You can jump in after me real quick. I think just in the respect of time here, I'll just echo everything Larry said. I think, time is of the essence here, quite frankly. We've seen a big backup in rates. I don't really see them going down, and all the talk is they continue to crawl higher here. So the sooner the better on this. And I think it's a compelling discussion between the 20 and 24 year, because I certainly fall in the camp of I want to pay as little interest as possible, but the longer maturity certainly provides that kind of flexibility that I think the town would be, lucky to have. This has been a relatively well-accepted approach in a variety of towns, including our neighbor. And I'm glad we're on board, and I encourage the council to push forward as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Carl and Jim.
I would agree with both Larry and Carl. The chief downside is that we could end up with negative arbitrage. But I think if sort of our reference rate is, say, 3.25%, 3.5%, the probability of that happens is low. The chief benefit to the town is that it will give some certainty in terms of the amount of payments that have to be made each year, each period. And from an operating standpoint, it will make Daria's job doable. Because otherwise, if you have it going up and then going down, that means then when it's going up, we're going to have to be cutting activities. And then when it's going down, figuring out how to backfill those cut activities. So this will allow us to smooth out our spending needs. And if it turns out we do have extra cash, we can always put it in the 115 trust or put it in one of the reserves that we'll have to set up. So.
Great, thank you guys. At this point, I'd like to open it up for members of the council to ask any questions to either our staff, our consultants, or our finance committee. Do we have any? Yeah, Fred, and then Bob.
Hey, Larry, if you don't mind, because I think one of the meetings, you're the one who brought up about not 100% funding the liability, but to do it like 80, I think you mentioned 90% plus or minus. Can you just kind of comment on that and what your thought process was?
Well, I think it's just what Todd mentioned earlier, which is if you get overfunded, or I guess Mike talked about it. If you get overfunded, CalPERS is not going to refund your money, and so you end up with the potential of having money trapped with CalPERS. Now, in all likelihood, there'll be some off years that'll eat up that surplus, and you'll be back to okay. But it just seemed like getting that number small, but minimizing the risk of overfunding the plan was the idea.
Okay, thanks. And Mike, you guys are comfortable with 88%? I'll say plus or minus at this point of time.
Yeah, I think what we're going to do too is monitor CalPERS returns up until pricing. So, I mean, I would have said 6 months ago that even going closer to 100 might be okay, knowing that CalPERS would have to earn above 7%. We know now that they have had a really good year this year. So that's a known factor. So I think we take that into consideration, and we get the town into the mid to high 90s with that assumption. So I think we're pretty comfortable with that target, especially now after seeing they're having a very good year.
Okay, and it's something I think you mentioned before, the reserve policy that we just passed, that will help with the pricing to a certain degree.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that I know Todd's pretty excited to argue for a high credit rating to the rating agencies, but there's been a lot of good trends we've seen with reserves building, but also policies put into place, and that policy is one of them. So that should be helpful for the credit rating process, and investors like to see that. From a management score is 30% of a credit rating, so policies fall into that management score.
Okay, so Todd will be on the call with you guys.
He's leading the charge.
AAA, we're thinking AAA.
Todd and Daria are going to be doing 70% of the speaking on Thursday. So
okay,
wish him well.
And just for clarification, it sounds like right now year 10, it could be year 9. We have the ability to pay those bonds off, but that's either in part or in whole, right? We don't have to pay the whole thing off. We can pay pieces of it off.
Yes, you can pay pieces of it off.
All right, thanks. And I appreciate your time and all the hard work you guys did on this.
One question I have is, would we want to just issue 19 million in par? Because I think the number I saw on your chart was 18.8 million.
Good question. I think our bond run is actually around 19 because there are costs of issuance. So that's the amount of UAL that gets funded. Okay. There's also a moving target because every day CalPERS does give you a discount for paying early in the fiscal years, which is another reason we're trying to push as quickly as possible, because every week maybe $5,000 to $10,000 lower on the payoff amount. So that is a fluid number, but I think we'll be right around 19, as you mentioned.
Great. Let's go to Bob.
Just a quick one for the finance subcommittee members. I just want to make sure you're all behind 24-year amortization on this, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other? Yeah, Leela.
Just wondering, on the 20 versus 24 year decision, did the stress testing really provide any help for that? Like I'm looking at the graphs you showed, I didn't see huge differences, it seemed, between the 20 year versus the 24 year. Did that inform, your recommendation at all?
It did. Good question. I'm pulling back up the slides. I think they're being shown right now. The one where we really see, when we look at the kind of a dire situation where we have another recession, what you'll see is that there's more of a gap between the dotted and the blue on the right side. And so if you look at the boxes, that still gives the town about 5.6 million of savings versus only 3 million on the 20 year. So, under that pessimistic situation, about double the savings, which gives the town obviously the ability to put that money into reserves and have more resources to deploy if there were to be a downturn, because there will be a lot more unfunded liability that would be due to the town if that downturn were to happen.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And my only question, just kind of piggybacking on Fred's question. So if we were to leave that sort of, 6% slack, so to speak, sorry, my layman's terminology here, that kind of puts us within striking distance of paying the rest of it off if we have, a couple good years and some surplus. Is that correct?
Yeah, and sorry to restate the question, what was the 6%?
Yeah, so when we're talking about, funding to only 94% to avoid underfunding, which to me conceptually sounds like a prudent thing to do. I just wanted to make sure that whatever, assuming that we're not going to get right up to that 100%, there's going to be some amount left unfunded. I just wanted to confirm that we'll be within striking distance if we have a few good years, with some good surplus where we could get to that, fully paid off.
Yeah, I think there's two things going on. So there's the surplus that you'll be saving each year into your reserves. And so that's going to give you flexibility down the road to pay this thing fully off. If, hopefully not, but if you have a lot more UAL, you could deploy it towards that. The other way we're using the term surplus is just the money already with CalPERS. The town should be cautious about paying the full thing off, because if they have good years, the amount of assets goes above what you actually owe, and CalPERS won't cut you a check for $1 million if you were overfunded. So we want to get close to that level, but you want to keep a little on the table.
Right, perfect. Understood, thank you. Any other questions from council before we open this up to members of the public here? And if not, we're going to go ahead and turn this over. And I might ask whoever's sharing their screen to stop so that I can see here we go. Okay, so now I can see the members of the public. So we're going to open this up to public comment. If any members of the public would like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email public comment at tcmmail.org. And I'll check with Rebecca. Do we have any emailed public comments on this?
We did not receive emailed public comments on this item.
Great, thank you. And I'm not seeing any hands up. So I will close public comment. We're going to bring it back to the council for discussion and direction to staff. Who would like to start us off? Bob.
Yeah, I am all for this. Thank you so much for doing all of this. I wanted to just briefly mention, Jim Andrews had talked about certainty and the importance of certainty in the future. I can tell you, as you've heard, you all know I've been on the council a long time. I was here during the big recession in 2008. We are the most sales to tax dependent town in Marin County, and our budget gets crushed in recessions. We're not property tax reliant like the other towns are. So to have certainty, I think is a huge, huge advantage for us. So I am all for this. I'm for the 24-year amortization plan. And I also just wanted to thank Todd for helping get us into this position. To where we were actually able to even have this discussion, because 10 years ago, we ran out of cash, as Jim mentioned. And the second part was I want to thank the Finance Committee. If the Finance Committee is behind this, we should all be behind it. I happen to know the 3 members that are here tonight personally, and I don't even want to speculate on how many years of high-level financial service industry experience we have with these 3 guys, because it's a lot. And if they're behind this and they've edited it, we're really fortunate to have them, and we should go for this. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bob. Charles.
Yeah, so first I just want to acknowledge I do understand everything that's been presented, even though I didn't ask any questions. So I also support it. Also, the other word I heard was predictability. And I think outside of 10 years ago, I think this last year, I saw Daria and staff and Todd respond to an unknown, but had a good handle on where our finances were, what we would peg, and then how to reduce. And so to give them even more kind of a solid base year in and year out to respond, I think is very prudent as well. So I just wanted to add that and thank everyone that's involved. This definitely wouldn't have come from my mind, and I appreciate what they're doing for the town and many more years of success. So thanks.
Great, thank you, Charles. Who else would like to share their thoughts? I'll just say that I absolutely second all of those comments that were made. And Fred, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and third all the comments. And I would make the suggestion or agree that we move forward with this and move forward with it the 24 years, looking out that far. And I just want to know from the Finance Committee, what's the next issue you're going to tackle for us? Todd's smiling.
wanted to keep him on the committee, so I'm not going to say, but yes, just so you know,
I'm sure Todd has something.
Again, thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you, Fred, and we'll go to Leela.
Craig, for your work too.
I just want to echo thanks here. I'm being new to this. This was a lot to try to get up to speed on quickly, and I've read through all the presentations and watched some of the old meetings, and just really appreciate the clarity and thoroughness with which you guys have gone through this. So thank you.
Perfect. And I think just for clarity and for the record, let's just do a quick show of hands, all in favor of moving forward with the recommended option in the staff report, which is a 24-year amortization option. Perfect. So that is unanimous. And Todd, was there anything else that you needed us to weigh in on at this point?
That's it. That's all we'll need. We'll see you on the 20th.
Great. Well, thank you to the whole team, everybody who had a hand in as was said, getting us to this position and carrying this forward. We really appreciate it. And with that, that concludes item 8B and brings us to 8C, which is discussion and possible action to appoint council members to fill vacancies on our various boards, committees, JPAs, what have yous. And so, Rebecca, did you or Todd, did anyone have any kind of like staff intro that they wanted to give?
Thank you, Mayor Beckman. I can just briefly introduce it and then turn it over to you. But as council and the public know, typically the committee appointments are shuffled each year when the council reorganizes and the council selects a new mayor and vice mayor. Given that this tonight the council adopted the ordinance to move to November of even year elections, and when that ordinance was introduced, council also voted for support of reorganizing at that time, starting, I guess, I suppose within this year. So we will reorganize and select a new mayor and vice mayor. That would take place annually, the first meeting in December. And for the time being, David Coonhart's resignation left several vacancies on town boards and commissions. And since we won't be doing a complete reorganizing of the committee assignments this year, it is prudent at this time for the sake of all the boards and JPAs that are waiting on us to make those appointments to fill the appointments that I have noted in red with the word vacant. And I suppose if anyone else wanted to chime in with an assignment that has come up that they would like to swap, we can do that at that time. But the primary purpose for this item was to fill the vacancies.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. We'll just do real quick. Any questions from council members, and then we'll do public comment, and then we'll come back to council discussion to hash this out. Any questions from council on kind of this process or what we're doing right now? Looks, oh,
Rebecca.
Yeah. Go ahead, Charles and Leela.
So just to clarify, there are the ones that are vacant, some of those, because I was the alternate, it looked like, or others were alternates, got moved to the primary. And then it shows the secondary is vacant, is that correct? But really, it could be that there is just a vacancy in those positions and we need to decide who would be the alternate and who would be the, it's not that it's just automatic de facto, the next person moves up. Is that clear?
No, I believe that I did not move primary alternates up to primary. We can do that if that is the...
No. I think yeah, we're going to have a broader discussion about how to deal with it.
Yes, but there are some cases where the primary is vacant and some cases where the alternate is vacant. And typically if the alternate wanted to move up to primary at this time, that could be an option, or we can fill them as they are.
Okay, thanks, Charles. And Leela, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask, are all of these where there's something listed as vacant, those were all made vacant by Councilmember Coonhart's resignation, or are some of these vacant for other reasons?
I think some were prior existing vacancies. Like, do we still have the mosquito vector district, for example, on here at the bottom of page 5?
Yes, I did not make those vacants red vacants. All the red vacants were the departure of Councilmember Coonhart. But yes, the Marin Commission on Aging and the Marin Sonoma Mosquito Vector Abatement District, those are both vacant. Those are typically community members that would apply for those positions and then be interviewed and then appointed. But both organizations would accept an appointee of an elected official if someone was interested in that.
Great. All right. Any other questions from council before we take public comment? And if not, we're going to turn this over to public comment. So any members of the public that would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmail.org. I see a hand up from Karen, so we'll go to her.
Hi, my question has to do with the Twin Cities Disaster Preparedness Committee. And that's co-chaired by, is co-chaired by Gabe from Larkspur, and was the other co-chair from Corte Madera was David. So I didn't see the Twin Cities Disaster Preparedness Committee on the list, but I didn't know if it showed up under some other umbrella name.
It may be that I have the name incorrect. I think I have that as the Disaster Council. I don't know if they are two separate groups, or if the Disaster Council representative represents the town on the Twin Cities Disaster Preparedness Committee.
It would be the same, Rebecca, so we just need to change.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, take care of it.
So it's under the umbrella of the Disaster Council.
That's correct.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Karen. And I'm not seeing any other hands up right now. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments on these items?
We did not receive emailed public comments.
Okay, thank you. Then I will close public comment and bring it back to the council to discuss this. So let me know how you guys feel about this, but I think maybe just for the sake of simplicity, it might be easiest if we, as a baseline, just kind of say that all of the vacancies left by David will kind of by default go to Leela, but then we can open it up for a broader discussion. If, like, for example, if there's any of those that Leela doesn't want or has scheduling conflicts with, or if anybody has any kind of horse trading that they want to do, or, you know, committees that they would feel strongly about representing. How does that sound? And so I think maybe Leela, let's start with you, and you want to just talk to us about, you know, the vacancies that we have here. Do these look good to you in terms of your kind of initial committee assignment from now through December, when we'll reorganize? And do you have any conflicts with any of these that you know of, or do you have any, you know, any of them that you really don't think you have the bandwidth or whatever to deal with?
No, yeah, these look fine to me. I wasn't sure when all of these meet, but the only thing I have on my schedule that I can't move is this meeting. So I assume none of these meet on, you know, second and fourth Tuesdays. So I don't expect any conflicts with those.
That would be great. And I'm sure that all of us who have served at various times as either the primary or alts to any of your roles are happy to, you know, offer any assistance, advice, whatever we can offer to help kind of ease your transition in there. The one thing that I did want to bring up for discussion, I was just looking at the Disaster Council, and I was just wondering, and you know, Leela and Fred, let me know how you guys feel about this. I was wondering if that might be a particularly good fit for Fred, just because of his experience, you know, with especially, you know, the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority and so on. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I don't mind stepping up to take that over. I think it would be a good fit. And also, I think the alternate for CMPA Council and also the Fire Council, I'm the alternate for those. So I think it would fit in.
Does that work for you, Leela? Okay, great. And then as long as we're having this discussion, does anybody else have any of their own kind of committee assignments currently that they want to revisit or discuss, attempt to pawn off on other council members, anything like that? And if not, looks like we are all pretty satisfied. Rebecca.
Thank you, Mayor Beckman. I just wanted to ask possibly Councilmember Ravazio, Marin Ready Together, that became the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, correct?
Yes, I believe it did.
Okay, I don't think, I have that listed farther on the first section under Joint Powers Authority Boards. So I think we can remove Marin Ready Together because that was a temporary assignment when the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority was working its way through the ballot measure process. Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's correct. And now it's the Marin Wildfire JPA.
Great. And I think that's it. Rebecca and Amy, do we seem all buttoned down on this discussion here?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Mayor has discretion to appoint, and you've appointed, so I think it's good.
Okay. Any other thoughts from you, Rebecca?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. That was nice and easy. That brings us to item 9, council reports and town manager, and we will start with the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I apologize. I know it's a long meeting. I just have a few quick updates, high level, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. First, I just want to acknowledge, we've been doing, we've had some volunteerism with two of our Park and Rec commissioners, Luis Brown and Pat Ravazio, really looking at ways through COVID to improve the Park Plaza. And one of those items is in process now. They started the installation of the retractable awnings. That'll be complete on April 16th, I believe. And that'll allow us then through inclement weather to allow people to enjoy our plaza without getting wet, protect you from the cold. It's a nice addition as we continue improvements within the Park Plaza. We partnered with the Corte Madera Community Foundation, as we always do on really great projects. And the Corte Madera Community Foundation helped fund this project. And so we're working on some photos and a press release, and we'll get that out to the community to share the great work and partnerships of our community members. So I want to thank Pat and Luis for that. The health order, we continue, in Marin at least, to trend in a positive way with vaccinations. California, as you know, has really ramped up the vaccination process. We're currently in the orange tier. We are anticipated over the coming weeks to move to the yellow tier. Really the goal is to be in the green tier. And so I want to talk about yellow and green for a second and what it means to us in the immediate future. One is, the green tier, we have to be in the green tier before we can mass gather or have large gatherings. And in order to have that, a lot of things have to happen, and we don't anticipate that happening by our 4th of July event. And so I just wanted to mention that to the council, the community. I owe Julie Kritzberger a call. She's been giving this a lot of thought. And so we're gonna work together on opportunities to have some sort of celebration, but safely, and kind of really think about how we can best do that. But we will not have, for the second year in a row, a 4th of July, as we've noted in the past. It's just not gonna be possible this year. Moving from the orange to yellow tier, that does have an impact, public meetings. And so you can have public meetings and start to think about that when you move to the yellow tier, which would be, again, let's just say in the next 2 to 4 weeks, potentially. The Board of Supervisors really, in a lot of the other municipalities, Rebecca and I have been on a number of weekly calls with our cohorts in the county, aren't really considering public meetings as we've known it before, even in the yellow tier, until probably midsummer, July. But what we're all working on is technology of where, think about the planning commission meetings and our council meetings of is there a way to do it safely once we hit the yellow tier, to have our council, if they're comfortable, or a planning commission in the same room, and where we can hold a meeting and then have it virtual, where people can still, have discussions and participate as we are now. It's important, especially on the planning side, when you think about appeals in the documents that have to be presented to council. There are some things that we need to start thinking about to really streamline some of our meetings. And so we're starting to talk about that to add another level of decision points for our town, is that we have our town hall project coming. And so we're gonna have to think about and be thoughtful about how we use that technology, how we spend it in the short term, because we wanna be smart with town resources. But to have a discussion with you in the coming weeks on what your expectations are and how you would like staff to really kind of problem solve the next 4 months as we think about our council meetings transition, spend some money with technology, maybe even move our meetings from the current council chambers at Town Hall to somewhere else, maybe the community center or another building within the Corte Madera. So we're going to put our heads together and kind of problem solve that and present some options to council, but we should be prepared for the next evolution of decision making. And the other good part is if council members aren't available to be in that meeting room, we can still use technology, but at least we have that opportunity to start having staff and the council together in a meeting. The other piece, and the other thing is all town staff now as emergency workers have qualified for the vaccinations. And so a majority of those that want it, and I think it's a majority of our staff, except for possibly 1 or 2 employees, we have all received the first dose of the vaccination, and we're set within April to receive the second dose. And so that's another important piece for us as we start to think about reopening Town Hall in moving forward. And the CDC and the county and the California are working together on what those protocols will be once vaccinations take place and what the reopenings will look like for us. Again, one of our other decision points are there will be a period of time with the town hall project where we're going to have to move our staff. Probably our recommendation will be modular spaces, possibly within the Pixley Park parking lot. And so that'll be coming to council too as consideration. The other pieces are our comment period for the CAP project. The draft plan has ended and staff has worked with our consultants to really summarize what those comments were. A lot of them are based, I think, a little bit on fear of the wall. And, you know, again, a lot of that terminology was taken out specific to certain neighborhoods, but there's still a little bit of fear there. But a lot of the comments, and I thought they were very thoughtful, have to do with science and data. You heard some of it from Roy Wolford tonight and others. And so staff is meeting with Mayor Beckman and our consultants tomorrow. And we're gonna basically spend a couple hours and really go through those thoughtful comments and really put our heads together of how to best proceed, make any changes as necessary, and then follow up and engage those who have provided public comment to us and give them an update and really continue to engage them. And ultimately the plan would be after that to bring something to council to consider for approval. So that's moving forward. And side by side with that, staff has made a slight change in what we shared with you before regarding the PG&E undergrounding. I've been working closely with Mr. Kaufman and members of the Christmas Tree Hill Dwellers group of really thinking about how we want to best proceed with any recommendations or thoughts about undergrounding. And one thing that really jumped out at us as we started talking about this was that we have not officially, as a town of Corte Madera, made a request to PG&E or the CPUC on undergrounding those areas that we think are high risk within our fire zones. And so we found a really expert on the field of dealing with PG&E, utilities, and the CPUC. And staff has an intent to, within my authority as a town manager, engage in a $12,000 contract for services this week to start that process of a records request of PG&E using data from our fire experts on our fire areas of high risk, and then analyze that data and present a letter of request to underground specific projects using Rule 20A and B monies within our community, both at the CPUC level politically, as well as PG&E, and make that official request. And so Mayor Beckman has been following this process with me, but I've taken the lead with our staff and the residents to move this forward. I would anticipate that letter going out within the next 60 days. It's important because PG&E is considering changing how they consider Rule 20A and B monies. And so there's an opportunity potentially to have some funding to do some projects, especially on our hillsides that have one-way ingress, egress roads, both on Chapman Park, over in East Corte Madera and on Christmas Tree Hill. And so we're motivated and we will obviously update our cap at any point in the future should we make headway in that area. And so that's a big one. Also moving forward, the post office, as you know, there have been a number of complaints of noise over the last 20 years at the post office. We've made some inroads positively. We thought we found a location for the post office to move using some of our real estate experts in the community. That fell through, that deal actually fell through for them. And so that's unfortunate, but we have 2 other sites in town that we're looking at, and we're still working with the neighborhood residents, as well as the post office and our real estate experts to see if we can find them a place to move to over the next few months. The good news for the post office is that they have a approved budget to either lease or buy property to move this year. So really the only hurdle right now is finding the right spot that makes sense for them and us as well from a noise and operational standpoint. And the last thing is the town hall project will be coming back to council the first meeting in May. And staff has analyzed the request of the council and the really good discussion. And really council member Lee had some, based on experience, some really thoughtful comments that helped us. So thank you for that. We have some estimates, and we're going to come back to council on what that would look like to completely start over with Town Hall, to knock down the building and then start from scratch. And so we'll have some estimates and a recommendation for your approval, as well as the funding mechanism. And so that'll come to you the first meeting of May. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great stuff, Todd. Thank you so much. Any questions for Todd on his report before we go to council reports here? And if not, we'll go ahead and start council reports. And Charles, would you start us off, please?
Yeah, so I had the Transportation Authority of Marin meeting this month, and we hadn't gotten financing for the additional lighting on Casa Buena from the federal resource, but the NTC was awarded money to hand out at a local level. And the TAM board had 2 tiers of projects throughout Marin that they were going to recommend. And because of the diligent work of our Public Works Director, RJ, he alerted me and staff at TAM of some additional information that checked more boxes. And then we were told that it wasn't going to be submitted in the tiered groups as recommendations, but then based on other board members, they decided to do the tier. So I lobbied to move ours up to the tier 1 proposals to be considered due to the new information, which the other board members agreed to. And so we should find out later this month, I think April 20th, whether MTC also agreed with that evaluation. And that would be $600,000 for new street lights along the new sidewalk and complete streets project that has already been funded to help create a better environment because of all the other investments that have gone on in that area. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you so much, Charles. Leela, we'll check in with you. I won't be surprised if you don't have anything to report, but anything you'd like to share with us?
Not at this time.
Excellent, thank you. We'll go to Bob.
Yeah, I had a homeless committee meeting. We talked a lot about Project Home Key, lots of positive comments about that. So thank you everyone for your work on that. And that program, it looks like is going to be part of the state budget again this year. It's up for approval right now. So we may be hearing more about that. We talked about the Community Homeless Fund, which all the towns participate in and we contribute to. That's going to be coming up for a renewal later this year. And we also got a big update on the showers program, which has been extremely successful at getting people into services. And they've been giving out just a ton of showers and it's become really popular. So we're going to try to continue that and the positivity around that. Also had a Central Marin Police Council special meeting to talk about a subject we are all now very familiar with, which was pension obligation bonds. And we authorized execution of those for Central Marin Police. And we also had a Central Marin Fire meeting. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. Fred?
Yeah, I'll just run down the list. I attended Casa Buena Steering Committee meeting. Leela was also at that meeting, by the way. And just a note, April 19th, Corte Madera is putting on a community-wide workshop on the Casa Buena. It's on the town's website. Representatives from town staff, the oversight committee, as well as Catholic Charities will be there to discuss a number of topics. And there's also going to be a chunk of time put aside for Q&A. So just keep that in mind. I also attended the Age-Friendly Corte Madera meeting. Just Monday, I attended Sales Tax Oversight Committee. Should be getting their annual report, I think within 4 to 5 weeks or so. And also attended the MCCMC monthly meeting and the MCCM economic recovery meeting also. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. And for me, I was realizing writing down all the stuff I did. I guess it's been like 3 weeks since our last council meeting and I was filling in for David on some stuff, but we're heading into a strategic planning workshop at Central Marin Sanitation Agency. So I'll let you guys know how that goes. Had Police and Fire Council with Bob, attended an MCE board meeting, had a Chamber of Commerce board meeting this morning. And on that, 2 things that I wanted to talk about were looking at, what's kind of the next phase of Corte Madera's assistance to local businesses. And I think, probably ripe for a council discussion there on whether we are able to divert some of our American Rescue Plan funding, that 1.8 million, if any of that is a good fit for that, or if there's other funding sources that we might use, and whether it's, you know, direct payments, rent assistance to businesses like we've been doing, or whether it's something a little bit, you know, something that kind of propels businesses forward a little bit more. You know, I was just talking with Julie this morning, and I know that she had some great ideas that she's discussed with Todd, things about, you know, getting like a shop local campaign up and running, and you know, different types of rewards for incentivizing folks to shop at local businesses, that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of exciting discussion happening there, both at the chamber and with staff. So I think that'll be something that we'll probably be hearing more about in the future. We had an MCCMC meeting, as everyone knows, MCC Economic Recovery meeting with Fred. I attended. And then we had a regular MCCMC Legislative Committee meeting. I don't think we had any particularly noteworthy items come from that. Nothing with a huge potential impact on Corte Madera. We had a separate Legislative Committee meeting with Senator McGuire, just to chat with him about kind of what he's up to this session. And then the League of Cities had a meeting with Congressman Huffman and Congressman Thompson. I know Bob was there. I think some others might have been there as well. The two main things that we talked about, obviously, were the American Rescue Plan. You know, Marin electeds want to know about funding coming to their cities. I don't feel that we learned anything, you know, new or particularly helpful to Corte Madera on that. And the other thing that we were talking about was the infrastructure bill that, you know, President Biden is working on. So we'll see, you know, as that kind of is translated into legislation in Congress, whether it looks like there might be any money or projects for Corte Madera. We'll keep an eye on that. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the League also had a legislative meeting with Senator Dodd, State Senator Dodd. And that the discussion, I think the most important thing we discussed there was his 5G bill, which the League is urging we oppose. I think, you know, this really ties into the past discussions that we've had on 5G. And I know 5G is also coming back up on our next agenda. So I'm sure we'll touch on that. But, you know, I think Senator Dodd's bill, which we'll get into at our next council meeting, has some concerning provisions regarding local control and you know, local prerogative over the placement of 5G infrastructure in the public right of way, and specifically, you know, regulating our ability to regulate or not regulate telecom companies putting, you know, giant heavy you know, telecom equipment on, for example, light poles that were not engineered to take that kind of load. So there's some concerns there that I think we'll probably be discussing coming up. But other than that, that is all that I have to report. And so that concludes our council reports. We'll discuss the draft agenda for our next meeting. Anybody have
Mayor
any
Beckman, there's a hand up, so I suppose we'll take public comment on town manager and council reports.
Oh, sure. Thank you. All right, we will take public comment. We're going to go to Roy.
This observation and comment is meant to be light, but I noticed the irony of Councilmember Lee talking about additional lighting, and watching him on screen, it looks like it's an old Orson Welles movie where they go into some alley and it's dark and you really can't see what's going on. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. I understand that Charles is camping and it is spring break for his kids, so we appreciate him making it work and being with us here tonight. And with that, I don't see any other hands up. Thanks for catching that, Rebecca. So we'll close public comment, move on to 10A, review of draft agenda for the April 20th meeting. Do we have any comments on that agenda? And if not, oh yeah, Rebecca.
Just to note for the record, thank you, Rebecca, for the public and for the council that we will be bringing back the smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance for reintroduction, or for introduction with the amendments that were discussed tonight.
Great point, thank you. And with that, we'll move on to item 11, which is our closed session. We're gonna take public comment on the item. The item is conference with labor negotiator. So if any members of the public would like to comment on this closed session item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. And Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments on this item?
We did not receive any emailed public comments.
Okay, thank you. And I am not seeing any hands up, so we'll close public comment and adjourn to closed session. And did we get a separate closed session link for this?
Yes, each of the council members were sent an email from me earlier with both your panelist link for the regular meeting and the link for the closed session. If you need me to resend that, raise your hand and I'll resend it right now.
Thank you very much. Oh, I see mine here. Okay, thank you. So the council is going to go into a separate Zoom for closed session, and then we'll come back to this Zoom meeting afterwards to report out and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
So we're just reporting out of our closed session. That was conference with labor negotiator, and we took no reportable action, and that is the last item on our agenda, and there's no ST2 meeting, so we are adjourned.